Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live, and I'm Cyril Stober. Tonight, the program will focus on democratic governance, what role for sub-national governments, and it will explore all constitutional privileges and rights as they pertain to the functionality of the second tier of government, including all structures and means of delivering critical services to Nigerians across the constituent units of the Federation. To start off, let's take this background report put together by correspondent Ekene Ndulue.
For decades, Nigeria's federal government has embarked on a stormy journey towards establishing good governance, a quest marked by ambitious reforms and sweeping policies. With each administration, there has been an earnest attempt to wrestle with the challenges of corruption, inefficient bureaucracy, and the demands of a diverse and growing population. Removal of fuel subsidy, economic diversification initiatives, and foreign exchange market reforms are recent initiatives that illustrate a commitment to better governance. However, these are not without some challenges. Difficulties in the area of security also remain pronounced, with security threats from insurgencies in the northeast to banditry in the north-central and northwest regions, and separatist movements in the southeast region, underscoring limits of federal capabilities. The centralized approach to security has sometimes failed to address localized threats effectively. This situation has illuminated the urgent need for state governments to step up, taking a proactive stance in bolstering local security frameworks, engaging community-based strategies, and fostering stronger collaboration with federal security forces.
Just like they say, every politics is local, even security is local. Those that commit this crime, they don't come from the air. They come from communities. They come from villages, they come from wards, they come from districts, and they come from local government areas. So the governors are in the best position to deal with the issues of crime. And why do I say that? Crime or security is not about guns, about APCs. It's about that human person.
On infrastructure, the federal government's plans for development have often been hindered by logistical and financial constraints. Projects aimed at improving roads, electricity, and water supply have frequently encountered delays and budget overruns, impacting the quality of life and economic activities across the country. Here too, state governments are said to have a crucial role to play.
Now, 52% of the resources of the country is in the hand of the federal. 48% is in the hand of the states. And we oversight that 52% so strongly and overlook the 48% so deliberately. Infrastructure, the 48% of the resources, ecological fund and other resources that go to the states needs to be oversighted by citizens who live there, who are the beneficiaries of that resources.
Similarly, the challenge of job creation and agricultural development has revealed gaps in federal policies. While national strategies have sought to stimulate economic growth, the impact on local employment and farming practices has been uneven. Social analysts believe state governments have the opportunity to bridge these gaps by implementing tailored programs that address local economic conditions.
Even during the military regime of General Yakubu Gowon, we had state governments running independent programs, independent of federal government. Of course, they were not opposed to federal government. They were not. We had a case of Adubaco in Kano.
Apparently, synergy between the central government and the subnationals not only enhances the effectiveness of governance, but also fosters a more inclusive and responsive system, ensuring that development and services are more equitably distributed across the country.
All right. That report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's introduce our guest to you. We would like to welcome Honorable Farouk Adamo Aliu, former minority leader of the House of Representatives, politician, businessman, and farmer. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nigeria.
We're joined tonight by Ezenwa Nwagu, Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms. Good to see you, Ezenwa. It's been a while.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right.
Good evening.
Let me also welcome to this program Dr. Tunji Abayomi, a constitutional lawyer. He joins us from our Lagos studio. Dr. Abayomi, good to see you. Studio. Dr. Abayomi, good to see you.
To see you. Good evening.
All right, and also with us tonight is Oke Ikechukwu, Professor of Human Capital Development. He joins us via Zoom. Prof, good to see you. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Same here. Thank you very much. Glad to be here too.
Right. Okay. So, yes, as you know, this program at some point in time, you'll have an opportunity to call in and air your views, ask questions, but that will be much later, and we will, at that time, remind you of the process and the procedure. For now, let's begin to look at the issues with regard to democratic governance and the role of the sub-national governments, the states. First, let's start off from the premise that the president has assented to the bill which will now guarantee that judicial officers will have their emoluments at both federal and state levels increased by 300%. And that too is coming on the heels of the assent to the national minimum wage of 70,000 naira. Let's start on that premise and say, how will these affect governance and running of the states? Honorable Farouk.
Well, thank you very much. I think as it regards to the salary increment to the judicial officers, it's a welcome idea, and I'm sure it's to ensure that they do their work and to also make sure that the state takes care of them so that they will always remember their oath of office and oath of allegiance so that they may dispense justice, the way it's supposed to be dispensed. And I hope this will be a good tone for all of them to see the sacrifice this country is making to ensure, that they are taken care of judiciously. And I hope it will be the starting point for the judges complain of their take home and so on and so forth. And you find out there are some cases where you find some judicial officers, some infractions and so on. So probably it's due to the low pay they have. Now that this has come to stay, I hope it helps us out of it. Now, the 70,000 naira minimum wage, it's still debatable, because unfortunately some of the states, more than a month now, most of the states really I don't think they can afford to pay because it's a law, but then whether they will pay,
Some will ask that, is it a question of being unable to pay or being unwilling to pay?
Some unwilling, some unable. Because there are some states, a lot of states that have so much debt burden on them, also over bloated public service across the country. In all the states, you find out that in most states, in local governments in particular, you find people writing the names of their wives and children and so on and so forth. And so some states are certainly going to be unable to pay. And that's really bad. And some are unwilling because there are states that have so much resources that they can afford to pay. But then also the civil servants will have to understand now that probably the states have to look into the number of workers they need to ensure that if they don't need any person, they take the person out.
Okay. Thank you. Ezenwa, let's come to you. And what are your thoughts about these two issues, how they affect governance? First, the judicial officers, both at federal and state levels, and again, the question of the national minimum wage.
Well, on the face of it, it looks like it will assist, but my worry and concern has always been when we have a challenge, we just think that once we throw money at it, then the problem is resolved. There are bigger issues than upping the pay of public officers. If you were earning 300,000, when you start earning $1 million, your needs increase. Sometimes people change their lifestyle, and then because of that change of lifestyle, a new demand emerges from that. So it's a honorable thing to be a judicial officer, first and foremost. There's something about it. When we're growing up, if you are called a lawyer, if you are set to be a judge or a magistrate, it was not just about the money. There's something that it carries. That thing that it carries, it can't be bought with money. And so where did we lose it? Where did we come to that point where we no longer see public officials the way we used to see them, in the past? So that disconnect is what needs to be addressed for me. But it's okay that people will have to earn more, but if the conditions with which they are working, the resources that is available to them that can make them work better is also not available. For instance, if they still have to write judgments longhand, if they still have to have meetings and the rest of them in analog forms, there are that itself, because the conducive environment has not been created to support the earnings that we're talking about. So, like I said, on the face of it, it's beautiful, it's okay, but the sociological conditions that will necessitate the aspirations that we have for our public officials may not necessarily be met. And for the 70,000 minimum wage, what was it? If you dollarize it currently, what does that mean? And then the 30,000 when we were earning 30,000 minimum wage at that time, what was the dollar equivalent of that? So I think that we need to do much more than, like I said, constantly throwing money at the challenges that we have and hope that they will disappear.
All right. Well, let's go over to our Lagos studio. Dr. Tuji Abayomi is there, constitutional lawyer. So I guess, Dr. Abayomi, the matter of the pay of judicial officers should interest you a lot at this stage, given the fact that it's recognized that you ought to insulate them from the temptations of that we have seen, and with all kinds of allegations flying around about why some judges have become who they are and what they are. Let's hear your take on this first.
In my view, I think we pay what I would call undue attention to the office of judges instead of the entire structure of the judiciary. A judge is only at the top of a hierarchy, the judicial hierarchy. For example, it's almost impossible for a judge to do anything without the registrars of court. And it is impossible for the registrars to do much without deputy registrars. And then you also have registrars of individual courts and then a lot of staff of the courts. Again and again, we spend so much attention, pay so much attention, principally to the judge. But I think what we need to do is actually serious attention to the very structure of the judiciary in our country if we want to preclude the courts in particular from corruption. Yes, judges should be well paid, but judges don't build the courts. That's usually the job of the chief registrar, who is basically, I believe, is the accounting officer of most courts. So our focus on the court, on the judges itself, in my view, is misplaced. Yes, the judges have to be paid well, but so also is the registrar of the court and basically the hierarchy. Then we need also to pay attention to the infrastructure. I mean, a situation where you get to the court, in some cases you can't find a chair to sit on, simply because the courts are small and dingy, very inconvenient, not conducive. I don't think it's appropriate. So, in my view, for our democracy and considering the preeminent position of the judiciary, a lot more needs to be done. Having said that, I believe also there's a need for rational order within the judicial system. A lot of judges, retiring judges in the Supreme Court, have again made it an issue that a situation where, for example, the Chief Justice of Nigeria is literally a dictator in virtually everything, totally unaccountable to any system, may not be okay. Of course, we also take the same position when we move from the Supreme Court to the states. So there's a need for serious review, what is called judicial reform, not just focusing on the judges, but the entire structure of the courts. With regard to minimum wage, in my view, well, I don't think, I mean, if we really think about it, how much minimum can we get below 70,000 naira in the present situation in the country? If there are states that are feeling that they cannot pay the money, then they should cut down the waste, because part of our problem in our country is there is a lot of abuse of money within governments, and abuse of, and a lot of waste within government. So an employee that is getting 70,000 for as a monthly salary, in my view, in the present economy of this country, that's the most minimum possibility. So I believe that once it is a federal law, the states must be made to comply.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abayomi. We'll return to you. Let's go back to Professor Oke Ikechukwu, and let's hear your opening comments on how we started this program. Prof.
Well, thank you very much. My first observation is that it is right that the pay packet of judges should go up because prices are going up. So there's nothing surprising in that. I also think that a 300% increase, it's something, but it could be a bit more. So there's no question about whether it should be there or not. Then concerning the minimum wage of 70,000, if you look at the value of the currency at the time, it was 30,000, and you look at the value of the currency today, you may discover that the worker who is earning 70,000 now is actually earning less when you convert it to dollars. But those are not the issues on the table. The primary concern, I think, is at two levels. At one level, it refers to the need to ensure that judicial officers are sufficiently and properly remunerated, but beyond that, that they also find a more conducive work environment wherein they can perform. And this should build up to a situation where you look at them and you look at their colleagues from other parts or in the other parts of the world, and you tell yourself that, yes, this is really what the judiciary should be like. So those are some of the challenges on the table. The matter of increase, let's not over-dramatize it, because if you would over-dramatize it, the question that one may be constrained to ask is, should their pay not really have gone up by about 900%? When you consider the number, there are not too many of them. When you consider the workload, is one of the most stressful. And when I say stressful, because proceedings are going on, as every lawyer, whether prosecution or defense, is speaking, the judge is writing what you're saying word for word. When any witness is talking, the judge is writing word for word in longhand. The same thing goes with judgment, the long sitting hours, the limited support services. In some of the courts, like Abarami has said, there's no air conditioning, the space is small. So while we must, if you like, commend the federal government for doing what is long overdue and for being sensitive enough, because if you look around, you will notice that the government is actually progressively touching on some of these overlooked things. So that's a plus. That means that government is, paying attention. So we first commend the government for this necessary, even if overdue step. Then we point out that hopefully in a very short time from now, it should be further reviewed. Because you're talking about that arm of government that ultimately is the validating authority for even the constitution of the country. The National Assembly can make any law. The executive can come out with any order. You may even have provisions of the constitution, but if the judiciary says this is it, there is no other recourse. That's the final voice. That's the last arbiter. That's, if you like, the ultimate autocrat in a democracy. And it needs the leverage that will oblige it to focus on what it needs to do without worrying about its own logistics. So it's a good development. And it's a good development. Then you come to the question of, back to the minimum wage thing. What do we really mean by a minimum wage? Also, what do we mean by workers? I think greater realism should be brought to bear on the conversation about workers and minimum wage. I know for a fact that we don't have up to 3,000 workers out of more than 250 million people. And when I say the workers, in using these terms, we overlook the fact that the man working in a farm behind your house is a worker, that the bulk of the workers anywhere in the world fall within what you call the informal sector. So when we use the index of government-paid workers to determine not only minimum wage, but especially because of its effect on inflation, I don't know whether we are helping ourselves. It's also time to review for states and the federal government to review their wage bills. If a state government is spending 30%, and that's being quite generous, on wages and salaries, would it be correct to say that the state is generating 30% of its revenue from those workers? You come to a state, probably the population of workers is, let's even be so generous, 200,000, and the population of the state is 4 million. That's official, recorded government workers who are taxable. And when you say there's a wage problem, their salary, the state grinds to a halt. The point to note and why the issue is important is that they have fixed pay. And their fixed pay does not respond to inflation. So when people express concern about minimum wage, they have a point. I'm earning 50,000. I used to spend 3,000 on fuel. Now I spend 9,000 on fuel and my salary hasn't gone up. It's obvious so it will affect me in many other ways. It could lead to me not paying school fees or rent or not being able to deal with hospital bills. So 2 quick things on the table before I stop. The salary increment for judicial officers is very good, particularly the judges. National minimum wage, yes, it's good. It has moved from where it used to be, but I believe it can go higher. But beyond going higher, if prices are coming down and productivity is increasing, the negative impact of the current minimum wage will not be so bad. It is because there's limited productivity, less goods in the market, less security everywhere, that the issue of I want more cash, which may not translate into purchasing power. That's why that has become the issue at the moment.
All right, thank you so very much, Prof. And back here in Abuja, let's now begin to place these moves in their true context. And I want to start off by looking at what we witnessed a short time ago with regard to the clamor for changes in the pattern of governance and what was generally termed as the protests, the national protests. But again, we see that a lot has always been said about governments at the center. And today, we say, let's look at what the states should be doing, ought to be doing, and see if the states have been carrying out the business of governance in the manner that they should. And why, if there is an overflow in a culvert somewhere in some village, the federal government is asked to do something about it. If a pathway is overgrown with weeds, I mean, the next thing you hear the residents talk about, oh, the government has to come to our aid. And the question is, where in all of this are the states?
You see, actually, the states are supposed to, the subnationals, they're supposed to be mini federal government where they are. I mean, they're supposed to deepen democracy at the state level, also to the dividend of democracy to be seen, to be, to take care of things that ordinarily people wouldn't look at federal government. Now, just the way you spoke about the protest, unfortunately for federal government, probably if you fight with your wife in the village, you say it's Tinubu because he's the president. And forgetting the fact that you have your councillor, in terms of governance, you have your chairman of local government, then of course coming to the governor and so on and so forth. So I think the states really need to do more, also to be seen to be doing more. And also the states try to all the time also cry that the federal government. There are certain instances where if the states will probably reciprocate, a lot of things would have been, would not be where they are. Take an example of the states now that are getting more money. Even though more money might not mean more expenditure because the value of the money as well. But for whatever it is worth, whatever the states are doing simply does not seem to be enough. When this crisis started, like the protest, nobody spoke about against any state government. Nothing. All the state governments were insulated. Forgetting the fact that, look, the states are also an integral part of the country. The states are supposed to, there are so many things that the states are supposed to take care of. Look at like roads. When states decide to go and do federal roads, they come to the federal and the federal gives them back their money. So I think the earlier we look ourselves at as, look, the government is supposed to work for everybody. The state government should not push blame to federal. Now that the local governments have been, taken out of the state control, I hope things will further trickle down. There will be more projects, just like the culvert you spoke about, cleaning and so on, payment of teachers, and so on and so forth, health centers, and where local government are supposed to do things which before now, or probably until next month, the states have decided to take over the role of local government. In most states, you find out that the local governments are given stipends, small amounts of money, just take care of themselves. So I hope now the states will understand that, look, they have their role. The role of the states is for them, as I said, to deepen democratic tendencies, to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, for people to see, so that there will be people will distinguish what is the state government supposed to do, what is the federal government supposed to do. And I think the federal government is probably not doing enough in terms of speaking out, trying to, identify, look, this is not even my role. If you tell me that the dam in my town needs to be fixed, it's not my role. Or the road into my village is not done. I mean, so there has to be, each segment of the government need to know its role, their constitutional role, and do it so that we, the people of this country, can feel better. And yesterday I saw a friend of mine saying that the whole problem is the constitution of the country. That's why the states are not working. To me, the problem is not the state, but the actors, we, the people of the country, we, the leaders. I mean, those that are saddled with responsibilities do not do enough for the people to eliminate the problem of the country. So I think the earlier the states take, their responsibilities, and then I think Dr. Aboyemi was saying, or one of the speakers, that the federal government need to enforce. Unfortunately for federal government too, there are certain things they cannot enforce. The Constitution does not give them a pass to do that. There are certain areas whereby land and chieftaincy and so on that nothing the federal government can do but advise you. Like today, when the National Council of State, if probably more National Council of States will be convoked, so that they among themselves will speak to themselves, tell themselves that, look, this country belongs to all of us, so that everybody will take his work seriously.
Isn't why the center is powerful? There's so much power at the central government, and perhaps this is what resonates around, and this is why when anything goes wrong, people talk about the federal and they don't look at the states or the local governments, because there's so much power at the center, and that's why many are calling for this to be divested of the central government. Do you see that as part of the challenges we face?
Well, I think the federal is meant to look that way. There's some intentionality in complexioning it in a manner that gives the impression that it's very strong. And so when we came back to civil rule in 1999, the leadership had not weaned itself completely of its military background, and so was appropriating, structures that ordinarily powers that ought to be exercised by other, structures, whether they are political parties, whether they have to do with local government. You remember the issue between Lagos State and the federal government. The Supreme Court ruled, and the president weighed in and said that was not, and never released those funds. That level of impunity had given the impression that the federal government was powerful. And those who took over from that period did not do anything. They continued to behave in the manner in which the first person, the kind of precedents that he set. What do I mean by that? The argument for state creation is that you are viable. When we were in the national conference in 2014, more than 100 groups came out to say they wanted states, and they brought proposals to show that if they were given those states, that they are viable. Right? So, and if you look at those documents, truly, you will see viability.
That's just all of it?
Yes, you will see that if you look at those, you will actually see that the things that can make them viable exist in those states. But what then happened? We came to that point where we started looking to the federal government and mobilizing our citizens to think that way. So, what do we discuss? We discuss national budget. Oh, when the budget is passed, everything will be okay. The Nigerian talking about the budget doesn't know that there is budgets passed in his own state. He doesn't know that the local government in the state passes a budget, including educated people who live within those communities. We all come from 4 different communities as individuals. The community where we are born, the community where we reside, the community where we work, and the community that affects all of us. But in all of these communities, we take our attention away and begin to focus. If you board a vehicle in any state in Nigeria and you're listening on radio, if it has to do with criticism, it must be about Abuja. The conversation within the state will have to be who visited the governor, where the governor went, and all of those issues. So there's a mindset capturing that has taken place to give the impression that the states, the federal superintends over everything. Like I said in the opener, the resources of the states, the federation is shared among the federal and the states. And I don't like you, I like you does not play in that. You must get every state gets its allocation every month. Whether the man at the top, whether you belong to the same party or not. So the resources that comes to that state, the structures of accountability and oversight within the states are weakened by the authoritarian rule that we have seen over a period of time within the states, capturing the state assembly. The state assembly in most parts of the country have no capacity to question the chief executive of their states. The state judiciary cannot rule against the chief executive of the state. The civil society groups and organizations within that state cannot do budget monitoring. So it has to take national organizations to follow the money and then budget and all of those issues, because the structures of accountability within the subnationals are weak or captured. So it's not that the federal is powerful, it is because it is made to look that way. And when these subnational structures of accountability and oversight are awakened to their responsibility, the governors will do what they have to do. You virtually have emperors in the states, and the pretense to the contrary is what amazes me at times, that we don't know that in the states there are no opposition. What you call opposition political parties they are appendages, really, if you like to use that word. But the point is that we will need to awaken what I call those structures of accountability and oversight within the state to be active. We need to raise more active citizens within the state. The kind of furor that exists during a national election, you don't see that in the local government election is abandoned by citizens in a way that the kind of accountability we expect from INEC, for instance, the oversight we put on INEC, the pressure that we put on those institutions, local government elections hold, governors and the dominant political parties within those states take 99%. 100. Sometimes without even a concession. And the election is supposed to be a competitive enterprise. It's supposed to be, positions are supposed to be contested. And then right now, you see a solidarity of benefit going on around the states in terms of even those who should be clamoring for independence, saying they don't want independence. And that is a huge challenge. It's a solidarity of benefit. So you come through a leadership recruitment process that is not democratic, and then a single individual appropriates that platform, and then everybody says, look, we are happy with what's going on. Don't give us independence. You know, even when we collect the money, we are going to bring it back to you. So the huge challenge for us is to awaken those structures of accountability and oversight.
Dr. Abayomi, is this the challenge of the Constitution? I know you always, when you speak about the Constitution, you have some views that are a lot different from what many people would say. But is this the problem of the Constitution? Is it what makes it so difficult for the states to perform their functions properly? Or is it the actors? Is it the people who are supposed to operate the Constitution?
Well, as it is now, I believe the structure of government in our Constitution indulges the states. The structure of government as it is now indulges the states. Now, if we look at our prevailing Constitution, and I have argued again and again that in fact, our nation has no constitution properly so called, because it is not a government that gives a nation a constitution, as it happens in the case of Nigeria. Rather, it is a constitution that gives a nation a government. As you can see, in our case, it was the military that gave us a constitution, a government, instead of the people coming together, adopting a document they call their constitution that will create a government over them. But let us take it as it is now, what we have now, which is mere decree. If we look at that document, I think we have 68 items exclusively committed to the authority of the federal government. And then we have another 30, which the federal government shares with the states. So the responsibility of the states to the people is basically taken over, overwhelmed, overshadowed by the federal government. If you have a situation where mere roads going through my village is under the control of the government, or even the waterways, or animal husbandry, agriculture, even primary education to a large extent, obviously you make the state, you have given pretense to the state to be as if it is not government. And yet, the reality of the matter is that there are actually 3 governments. Federal government, and the word government is attached to each of them. Federal government, state government, government of the several states, and the third one, which I call the invisible government, and that is the local governments. If we have an appropriate structure, constitutional structure, as indeed we had when we started, for example, in the regional governments, you can see the effect. And one of the advantages that we have also is that the people are able to, in a sense, monitor the responsibility and the appetite of governments. Because when a government is smaller, it is much easier for the people to deal with it. What do you really do with a federal government that is everything, everywhere? So that's one of the problems we have. If we look at the recent demonstration, there was so much, but everybody was focusing on the federal government. What's the problem? There's hunger in the land. Is it the federal government that's going to produce food, the foods will have to be produced in the states. Like I said, the problem, the solution to hunger is food. And the way to get food is to farm. Who has the land for the purposes of producing food? The land is in the custody of the states. But if we see the entire agitation and the demonstration is against the federal government, as if it is the federal government. So there's a need, in my view, for this nation, the peoples, and I say peoples of Nigeria, as soon as possible, to come together, sit around the table in what I think is Leopold Senghor calls a universal banquet, and agree on the type of government structure that is fit and appropriate for the peoples of Nigeria. Like I have always said, Nigeria is a very unique nation. We are talking extremely unique in the sense that there is no nation that I know of, or at least few that I know of, where the various nationalities are committed to specific geographical location providentially. I mean, if you look at Nigeria, you have the Yorubas in the southwest, you have the Igbos in the southeast, you have the Jukuns, Thieves in the center, the Kanuris in the northeast, Fulani in the north. These were people that are divinely located. And I don't think it is a mistake. God didn't make a mistake. But if we now want to build a nation, what I call United Nations of Nigeria, what would be appropriate is to sit around and agree as the nation. Until we do that, I'm sorry, we will continue to have failed development and imperfect governance in our nation. And the states will continue to pretend. Look at the situation in Ireland. How many state governments are under any control? None. The houses of assembly are weak and even non-existent. So everybody pays attention to the National Assembly. Everybody pays attention to the president. Everybody pays attention even to the federal civil servant, as if there is no civil service in the states. So this is the problem we have.
Let me go over to Professor Ikechukwu. And again, when we say that the Constitution, that's taking the words from Dr. Abayomi, that it gives room for the states to get away with all kinds of things than the governance issues. What then can be done to reverse the situation? Is it a change in the Constitution or in the people who operate the Constitution? I mean, for instance, he himself has just admitted that in many states, the executive is firmly in control.
Well, it is not the Constitution. You can write any Constitution you like. The behavior of the people will make all the difference. If I recall correctly from records, I think the U.S. Constitution was given to them by 200 people selected. Let's also make certain distinctions so that maybe we'll be very clever what we're saying. When we say that the army gave us a constitution, or that some people sat down and wrote the constitution for Nigerians, and that it ought to be the Nigerian people who will meet and write constitution, I think we should have it on record that not anybody knows how to put together a constitution. If you call a constitutional meeting of everybody and you include Dr. Abayomi there, Dr. Abayomi will be the most informed or one of the most informed, and who knows how to navigate some of the content, both in language and focus, but he can extract content from the needs of the people properly understood. So I've never been one of those championing, calling for a people's constitution. I see there's a marketplace where all the, if you say, okay, let's give ourselves a people's constitution, in which case all the ethnic groups will send representation. Who will come from the Southeast? Oh, let the people of the Southeast come. That's when the real fight will begin, because all the various nationalities, we say that we are 250, ethnic nationalities. They will have to select who will represent for them. The selection process will never end because there will be war about that. So I thought I should place that on the table so that the talk about a people's constitution is not made to look more alive than it ought to be. The second point concerns subnationals. Yes, also when we speak of the federal government, we actually think of just the executive arm. That's not the federal government. It's a three-arm government that over the years has turned renegade, and only the executive arm is called the government, whereas it's a concert of three on a tripod that should administer the nation. What has happened over the decades is that political consciousness has declined. The quality of leadership has declined because the quality of people taking leadership positions have also declined. Leadership is about service delivery and the disposition to elevate the people at the level of consciousness, at the level of social responsibility, at the level of self-worth and sense of community. All of that has disappeared. So when you're talking about accountability, I mean, a local government, every month the local government chairman gets 150,000 and 50 million, nothing happens. Under him, there are ward chairmen and there are council chairmen, they do nothing and nobody expects any. So you find that, first of all, part of the crisis is the fact that the populace at that level are not even, first of all, politically aware. They are not socially aware. They don't understand what it means for somebody to hold office. That's why they will be there. A local government chairman who had a rickety car a few months before he became local government chairman, in 18 months has built a 300 million naira house in the same local government. They troop there to go and congratulate him. You find that the environment itself is not yet mature for the plant. Most of the crusaders are saying should be put there. You go there with all the puritanical ideas and you find that the wrong demands are being made. So what I see on the table is a nation that has deteriorated over time due to the poor quality of people assuming public responsibility. But more importantly, has also created a large population of a very uninformed populace that's making the wrong demands. So if you write a new constitution conferring all the rights, a constitution is not a human being. Because the constitution exists today and is being violated, not because it doesn't exist. Laws exist today and they're being violated because we don't know they exist. So first of all, there's the quality of the human person. And that's why responsible leadership is needed for now as a very critical success factor.
Okay.
Those who will talk and say, oh, if you go to Europe or you go to the US, you see that this and that is working. But that's because there's a certain level of consolidated political consciousness wherein right and wrong are defined, and institutions of state are strong. Here, people are largely loyal to their pockets and their ethnic groups, and to that extent, the texture of the social fabric is not strong enough for building the kind of society in the short term that many idealists are looking to see first thing tomorrow morning.
Okay. Well, we have a number of reports. Let's take a few of them from this point in time. Let's take this one from Lagos.
Governance is about meeting the needs of the people, and that begins from the local government levels for infrastructural growth, maximum inclusivity, and equitable development, as Lagos is set to have 20 local government areas and 37 local council development areas.
It is a joint obligation where the states that also get the allocations should play major roles. The local governments that are now made to be funded directly should also play their roles. The role of job creation, the role of rejuvenating the economy, the role of providing security, and the role of ensuring that enabling environment exists for businesses to thrive.
If citizens are properly educated and if citizens have access to quality health, citizens will definitely contribute meaningfully to development. And let's take it further. The role of local government also extends to construction and maintenance of roads. especially Trunk C Road. Instead of people, trying to complain about inability of the federal government to do A or B, people should now hold their local government chairmen and councillors accountable.
Without a virile and efficient local government system, there cannot be development at the local government level. Some of us are tired of seeing underdevelopment from cradle to grave. There are places where we do not only lack development, but things are receding, and we must do something about it.
The move by the federal government to entrench local government autonomy has been commended as one that will deepen participation of the government at the sub-national levels.
I must commend the Supreme Court for doing the right thing, because what the court says is the law. We have seen the letters of the Constitution, but they have not served us. Supreme Court is a court of policy, and in my own view, it has done well by purposively interpreting the Constitution in such a way that can even give hope to the people that all is not lost.
The Constitution of the Federal Government of Nigeria clearly stipulates functions of the 3 tiers of government, of which the local government is expected to foster successful dividends of democracy for the people at the grassroots. In Lagos, Amaka O.
All right, from Lagos, let's get to see this report from Plateau.
Nigeria's journey through nationhood has been confronted by several obstacles, with each of the leaders trying their best to keep the country on course. Promises made, laudable policies penned down, but in most cases, not much is achieved as the nation continues to grapple with the same challenges over time. One of the excuses is that there's too much pressure on the government at the center, hence the need for states to loosen their grip and to look inwards for some form of independence.
The states should know that they have the right to take care of the citizens. They don't have to be a beggar state. So take good care, take inventory of what you have, natural resources, and see how you can make best use of it. You have acha on the plateau, we have coffee on the plateau, we have potato, which are of high commercial and export values. If we look at that and encourage indigenous private participation, there will be less dependence on the federal government.
In 2022, we did a study mandated by Mr. President at the time on local governance in Nigeria. And one of the findings that we came up with, one of the recommendations, is that in order for us to get away from the over-centralization and over-dependence on the center, is to make sure that we make each local government a production unit, that we do a comparative and productivity assessment of the 774 local governments, find out where their strengths are, where their institutional and capacity gaps are, provide support around those areas of weakness, and find out where they have comparative advantage to produce something. Every local government in Nigeria can be a productive unit if given the necessary support.
Once you strengthen the local governments, then the local governments get to do a great deal of what some of the states are now doing. But even more profoundly is the need to ensure that resources that ought to go to the local governments do not end up being manipulated at the level of the state to the detriment of the local government.
As citizens' demands and agitations for certain rights continue to grow, it is the consensus of these experts that Nigeria has no excuse not to make progress, given its abundant resources.
All right. At this point, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll continue with this discussion and take in at least one more report. And then, of course, the phone lines will be open and you can get join in the conversation in the studio. For now, stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Right. Thanks for staying with us. And, we're going to take that report anyway. And this one is coming from Kaduna. But just before we take that report, let me just remind you that immediately after this report. The phone lines will be open. The numbers to call will be on your screens, and you can call in with your question or comment. We encourage you to go straight to the point, and as we say, don't bother about the greetings. Just a simple hello would do. And if you get through, just turn down the volume of your TV set to avoid the hurlback or the echo. Now let's get to see this report from Kaduna.
Political analysts believe that true democratic governance is only achieved when power and responsibility are shared. Musa Zubairu is one of them. He says to build a strong and prosperous nation, every level of government must contribute its quota.
Once you have a subnational like the state that is working effectively, I can tell you the federal government will reduce the load on itself, and then they will be able to really to function very effectively, and then talk to the people very effectively, and then the people will now know that they have government. The people will appreciate the fact that they are really participating and their voices are being listened to.
Abedin, a civil rights activist, also shares the same opinion. He says the federal government cannot be the only entity in a federal system responsible for national development.
They tend to push every blame to the center. You see, it is a common rhetorics within the subnational government to tell you, when you complain of everything, they will tell you, no, it is the federal government. We just had a protest in Nigeria that was hijacked by some criminal elements that maimed, killed, and loots properties. You see, some of these governors will tell you, oh, yes. In fact, a governor that is expected to come out and pacify the citizens, tell them that, oh, we are doing something to alleviate your suffering. You see, some of them shamelessly will just come to the public and tell you that the president needs to do something, as if himself, as the governor of a state, a governor of a state doesn't have a role to play in alleviating the suffering of the people.
From the construction of critical infrastructure to the provision of essential services, Abedin says the state and local government have crucial roles to play, using their own resources to drive growth and development.
But everybody wants to blame the center, the president. It is not only that. The president is there upstairs at the center. What is the governor doing to alleviate the suffering of his people? Through education, through coordinating security in his states, through agricultural development, food security. If we really want to get it right in this country, citizens must start developing the attitude and habit of asking their subnational government questions.
The stakeholders are calling for a shift in perspective and attitude by Nigerians for the citizens to hold their leaders at the subnational level accountable for leadership and development. In Kaduna, I am Muhammad Umarajingi.
All right, back to the studio here, and as we proceed with this discussion, let's look at the issue of the autonomy, the financial autonomy now which the local governments do have. Should that lighten the burden of the states?
Yes, of course. Of course it will. And because now it's like mandatory for the states to allow the local governments to operate, which means there will be more works at local level. The local government will have to step up, and they have to step out also, and the people will know that, look, local government was supposed to come and clear this road. They haven't done that. Now they have the money. So I think it will be less burden on the state, less burden on the federal government, and clearly now people will see that, okay, after all, I didn't know that local government was supposed to put street light. I didn't know local government was supposed to, do 1, 2, 3 things. So I think it will lessen the burden. And people should also hold their leaders, local leaders, accountable, from councillor, chairman, and so on and so forth, so that, this agitation at the federal level, let's also translate it back to the local level, so that the way you put fire on the president here, the local people should put fire on their local government chairman, and the governors as well, so that things will start working for the first time in the country.
Well, let's look at it this way. Do you worry about the quality of leadership at the local government level? I mean, it's said that for a long time, very little attention, except for a few states in this country, who could actually say the quality of leadership at the local government level was high. Most people just relegated that tier of government to say, well, just anybody, you could just plant anybody in there who would owe their allegiance to the state governor, and that's just it. So now that these local governments are to function properly, what's the quality, what do you think the quality of leadership is here?
So I think Professor Oke puts the nail on the head. The quality of leadership is not the quality of educated people.
Yes.
So people can be educated, but still do not possess the appropriate leadership skills. So that distinction needs to be clear. The first challenge for me is the leadership recruitment process in the local governments. How do people emerge? Do they emerge through a contest or a selection or appointment? Now, if the process of emergence is not one that is democratic, to expect a democratic local government is a mirage. If you have financial autonomy and there is no political autonomy, you still have to deal with the challenges that you thought you have.
All right.
You have.
All right. Let me take this call in and then you'll continue. Michael, calling in from Kubwa. Michael, go ahead.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Michael Yakore. I'm calling from Kubwa.
Right.
Okay, I just want to maybe disagree a little with some of the things. Maybe not disagree, but have another perspective.
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I had the Prof and I had the Dr. Tunja Abayomi talk about the Constitution not being an issue. It's not the Constitution, that gives the federal government right. In my state, the mineral resources, I don't have right over them. The federal government has. You want the state government to do better. I agree. But are there encumbrances from the Constitution that stop this state government, from doing what they're supposed to do? For instance, what stops a state government from mining the oil and maybe paying some to the federal government? Instead of you mining my state, let me say this, and I'm saying this on national TV. You have petrol in the south, but the major stakeholders of this petrol are from the north. You understand what I'm saying? So there are encumbrances from the Constitution that stop the state government. The protest, I'm sorry I'm taking your time, most of the destructions were done in the state. Why is the federal government? The federal government is in the state. Most of these things that were destroyed in the state. For instance, in Kaduna, the one that was destroyed was a state government institution. It wasn't a federal government. So when people say people are talking about president, it's not true. People complain about their state and their state governor. The fiscal policy of a nation is by the federal government, not by the state. It wasn't the state government that increased the price. It's the federal government. So we know what we are talking about when we complain about the government. Yes, the state government have what they are doing, but they have encumbrances from the Constitution. That's what I do. While I agree with every other thing they have said, but we have these encumbrances from the Constitution itself, and it needs to be sorted out. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much, Michael. Yes. Right.
I think first is that even if you have mineral resources in your state, you eventually will not be the one mining. You would either Ondo State created a company, an oil prospecting company at some point, which they later divested. States can create those companies and take the resources from their state. I think we make a fetish of some of the theories that we have carried over a period of time. The encumbrance. The question is the allocation, the resources that accrue to the federal, is it spent by the federal alone? Currently, the ideal is something else. But what obtains today, those accruals that come from the resources of the country are not completely taken over by the federal. It is shared 52 to 48%, to the best of my knowledge. So I think this conversation has to be much more in the sense that what we have seen is the nature, the character, the complexion of the elite, the governing elite of our country, who are in the business of constantly outsourcing. People in the National Assembly will be making a conversation. They say government has not, government should, and then the man does not see himself as government. He thinks that the person that is government is the person in the executive. The states will say the government has not. He's talking about the protest. Many of the governors were saying that they were going to support the protest. Some of them even prepared to be part of the protest. Against who?
Themselves.
So the whole challenge is, for me, I am thinking more in terms of how do we begin to make most of the resources that is available to the states. The Constitution, Dr. Abayomi talked about 68 coming to the federal, 30 to the states. Within those things, there are concessions that, as we speak now, we are running almost the IMF World Bank, privatization, commercialization, and it doesn't have tribal marks. So if you are from anywhere, you can buy. You can buy. The states can also put money together and buy, some of those resources, because that's what they are running. So they permit to use that. The non-effectiveness of the states has been blamed on federal. But what needs to happen, like I keep saying, is that you need to galvanize the potentials that are within those states, the human potentials. So when you talk about education, educated people are being selected by the governors to go to the local governments to become, so until you have a serious political autonomy, by that I mean what kind of structure do you conduct local government elections? Okay. If the sects are not improved and empowered to conduct local government elections that are democratic, to expect democratic content from the people who occupy those positions will be a mirage.
Right. Cyril, I just want... Okay, yeah.
Right, let's take this call from Biu. Hello. Yes, could you just introduce yourself and go ahead? Caller from Biu.
Hello.
Hello, go ahead.
We have our problem, with our problem with our leaders is that they don't take governance as governance. They take the leadership as if they are running their company. For instance, now state governors, they have forgotten about the resources we have on ground there. They don't harness the resources and make use of it. They also depend on the national federal government. Now the resources have collapsed. Where we have mining, where we have farming, we are not using it judiciously. We all go to the federal government That is why, you see the government is collapsing. Now, the federal government is giving money to the governors without checkmating. They give them money, they allow them to do whatsoever they like because of the future election they are seeing. For instance, now 2027 is coming. Mr. President is afraid to have issues with the governor because he knows that when election comes, they may not work for him again to elect him again. So these governors are so powerful. They will not allow. They will not give him the chance to come again. And our problem again is, leadership is about is working for the people at the grassroots. When people are suffering, you have to ask yourself, what is the problem there? Our problem with this current protest is this fuel subsidy, removal of this fuel subsidy. That is the only problem that creates all those problems we are seeing around.
Okay.
We have never had any protest like this one in Nigeria. Yet Mr. President did not listen to the cry of the people. Now, how do you lead your people by giving them by through hardships? When they cry about hardships, fuel subsidy, NEPA bill. You did not listen to them.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you. All right, let's, yes.
Three quick points. One, about the leadership recruitment in the local government. I think now it's upon us and the governors that, since monies will be going to the states and the local government. So I think educated people should be put forward, so that the resources could be,
But as Izewa has said, that would still not guarantee leadership.
Okay, lettered people. Maybe, lettered people. But then, talking about the Constitution and so on, you see, this is a talk shop in NTA, which you guys do every Tuesday. Various television stations, radio stations. The National Assembly, as presently constituted, anybody could see them as nothing. But nothing will happen without them. So I call on ethnic nationalities, impress on your members of National Assembly. Let them go with 1-point agenda. Amend the Constitution. Otherwise, it will all be talk. So let the members of the National Assembly kickstart correct constitutional amendment to take care of the interests of their areas so that we can have this so-called People's Constitution.
All right. Let's go back to Dr. Abayomi in our Lagos studio. Dr. Abayomi, we've been following the trend of the conversation here. At this point in time, what do you see? Speaking of the leadership at the local government level. At the local government level.
Correct an impression. When you talk of people's constitution, it doesn't mean that all the people will gather together to write a constitution. What it means is that the people will inspire the process. Let me give you a simple example. It's like we have a cocoa farm. Nigeria is like a cocoa farm that maybe 5 children of the same father is their inheritance, like Nigeria is the inheritance of all of us. The question is, how do we manage that cocoa farm that we inherited from our parents? The most sensible thing is to agree, either through our representatives, maybe the children of the father, they sit around the table and agree, this is how we want to manage the cocoa farm. And then that agreement is what we call a constitution. Why is it a constitution? Because you have the consent and the approbation and the contribution of different. It's not a question of where one single person who, for example, has a gun compels everybody to follow his own view of managing that cocoa farm, that inheritance. That's the difference. So it is not like everybody will come, you inspire it. And that is what all good constitutions. It is not the content of a constitution that validates it. It's the procedure of making a constitution. Now, the issue is, what do we want Nigeria to be? A nation with the capacity and ability and the stature and the fecundity of its citizens as demonstrated everywhere in the world is embarrassing itself if it cannot become one of the major nations of humanity. And if we have continued in the path we are, and we have not been able to achieve a better society for our people, it makes some sense that you take a look at the very foundation of our existence and do something about it. Let us look at the issue of simple things like local government. How do you get the local government to develop within the local environment? The present constitution makes this impossible as it is. You can amend this constitution 1,000,000 times. You won't achieve a whole lot. First and foremost, an illegitimate constitution is not only unamendable, it is also not unamendable, so to say. How do you do it? How do you put legitimacy to it? Legitimacy comes from the people, their agreement. It is not, from the document. Indeed, with due respect, and I'm not terrorizing, but the people of Nigeria must understand it. The military itself didn't give itself the power to give us a constitution, gave itself the power to give us laws. A constitution is not law. It's an agreement by the people to constitute a government over themselves. When it goes to the point of a constitution, that's why I call it Decree 24 of 1999. So, if we want development as a nation, it is very simple. We have to be serious about the affairs of Nigeria. There will be no development, whether at the local government or at the state level. Simple issues as to the states. Look at the money that some of the governors keep, the so-called security vote. In fact, they create insecurity for the people. So these are the issues, serious issues of a nation that we need to focus on if we want to develop. The crisis we have now is perplexing, and as President Obasanjo said in his interview, we are sitting on a gunpowder. We are sitting on a gunpowder. If the peoples of Nigeria are not serious to take a serious look at, he was talking of the National Assembly. Is it not part of the problem we have, where the National Assembly gives itself everything, it determines its worth, its allowance, its everything, contrary to even the existing constitution. So, if we want development, which is the essence, the whole crisis that our youths are talking about is because they are embarrassed that their nation cannot meet their needs. That is the issue. So, my suggestion is that at a point, our peoples, I say peoples of Nigeria, must come together. What manner of document should we use? People should not say, oh, it's the people. It's a system that creates people. In Western society, it's institutions that have integrity. Because institutions have integrity, individuals cannot just misbehave. In our situation, we have a situation where individuals are more powerful than institutions in our country. These are the problems of governance in our nation.
We'll come back to you. Let's get back to the phones. We have Henry, who's on the line, calling in from Rivers State. Hello, Henry.
Good evening.
Good evening. Go ahead.
Yes. Please, I thank you for this quite educative and expository program. I totally want to say that Nigerian problem is multidimensional, but I am tailoring to the issue of de-emphasizing the emphasis on center, the government at the center. I am asking question concerning local government at the local government level. How we at the local government level, how do we monitor and hold the government at the local government accountable? How do we follow what comes to the local government level to know what accrues to local government and how it is being used? How do we monitor and follow it? That is my question, sir. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Henry. Let's go back to Professor Okeke-Chukwu, and he would speak on the aspect of leadership at the local government level. He is a professor of human capital development, so he should tell us how we can step up the quality of people who will run or who are running the local governments. And again, this question that Henry has just raised, how can the people keep abreast of what the local councils are doing? Even if they get the money, how do you follow the money and see what's deployed to and how it is expended?
The first question to ask, I think, is what can be done about the quality of people in the local government where you're looking for a local government you want to hold for to be accountable? We all know Dr. Abayomi and his nature, disposition, and social orientation. Imagine that he becomes a local government chairman today. What kind of demands will he be meeting? Not the demands of people like him or all of us here. If I become a local government chairman today, it will be my friends, relations, uncles, associates who will say their time has come. So I'd like us to pay attention to fundamental crisis of the quality of the average person, the problem of the wrong expectations. A society that has had so many examples of inappropriate behavior that inappropriate behavior in leadership has become the norm. An environment where anybody who takes public office no longer realizes that it is for service delivery. Those are the fundamental issues that constitute the crisis we need to think about. So two things stand out for me. For change to occur in an environment like that, you will either have a strong leader who deliberately, persistently, and without apologies enforces the right laws and principles because we have enough of them, in which case his or her strength of character becomes the moral backbone for insistence. He will resist. The alternative is for suffering to deal with people to the extent that eventually they will begin to take the right decisions. And I'll take that back again to the matter of the Constitution. Yes, there might be a distinction, and there is, between the content and provisions of the Constitution. But I ask, refusal to obey traffic rules, is it because the light is not working? No. The crisis in most aspects of our everyday life, is it because there are no laws against them? No, the laws exist. They are not being obeyed. Those to enforce the laws are taking gratification in order not to enforce it. So it takes us back to the foundation. But when we think back to the fact that there was a time when we had leaders who wouldn't tolerate what is wrong, when we had citizens, all of us here in the same Nigeria decades ago, who would say, no, this is not done, then it must mean that something began to go wrong at some point and kept going wrong, and the wrong paradigms kept getting promoted until it overshadowed the national psyche, so that the predominant paradigm for proper behavior today is improper behavior. Tell me, when a governor receives, okay, like for the month of this month, this is August, or is it July now? I'm not sure there's any state that got less than 5 billion. You look through the same month, is there any state that got less than, any local government that got less than 100 million? Now, what you'll find is that there's a disposition to conspire and share national resources rather than query those in custody of those resources to demand for them to tell you what they're doing with it. So that selection process, if for instance there's a state governor, and you know that the state governors to a large extent have some control over the local governments, and the state governor uses his political muscle to ensure the right type of people are chosen. For instance, you come to a local government, you call the major stakeholders and say, listen, if you were to choose somebody to be your leader here, who would you select? I'm not talking about somebody who has money, who will need to pay to be, who will need to spend 100 million to get nomination form. Somebody who, if they ask you, who do you think will protect your interests in the village square? Who would you recommend? You carry out that kind of survey or quiet consultation, and you choose the people that the people themselves know, or the persons that the people know will serve them. That is how you can help with the recruitment process. The reason why that would be advisable at this point is that the basic political structures or platforms for decision-making for leadership recruitment has been overtaken and run over by political highwaymen who look for people they will place in positions for them to help them pluck from the common treasury. That is one thing that can happen. But all the talk about method and system, they exist. Most of those asking what can be done are busy stealing in their little corners. If they get a chance to go near a local government chairman, they'll give him a paper for a contract. So let's also not pretend that in the course of discussion and raising issues, all those raising the issues are them.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Just lost that signal there. But I'm certain that we'll get back on it and we'll get into some very interesting points there about if those clamoring for this accountability will do any better. We've seen situations where people are on, as they say, this side, and the minute they get on the other side, they change color and become something else. But we'll return to Professor Okeke-Chukwu in a short while. Hopefully the signals would have stabilized and would have them back. Yes, do we have the signals back now? Yes, right, Prof, just go ahead.
The crisis that we are pretending is a purely
Tuesday Live, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Okay, the whole of society crisis that we are pretending it's a purely political one. Look at it. In every society, you have what you call the pillars or custodians of right and wrong and value. I get into politics as a local government chairman. Everybody sees me turn stupendously wealthy in a very short time. My uncles don't call me and say, okay, our son, the way you're spending and these 9 cars you bought within 5 months, we are concerned. I hope all is well. I hope you've not gone on evil ways. They don't tell me that. My pastor doesn't call me or the reverend father or the imam and say, my son, what is going on? No. Instead, I become a more prominent member of my religion. I come late to church. I'm allowed to come to the front row and sit. I greet people even before sitting down. Alternatively, I also get a chieftaincy title. So you find that all the things that ought to be restraint and moral anchor for socialization and social discipline have also crashed. So let us not talk as if we're on the moon. The foundations, it will take very responsible and serious leadership, not an idealistic leadership that's busy complaining that, oh, we have wonderful policies, it's not working. No, you must have capacity for the legwork. Know how to negotiate, know how to navigate, know how to work with, know how to undermine the forces on the ground. If you're not ready for it, just stay out of the fight. So to expect that those who are enjoying today will lie down and die, or they will give over to you what they're enjoying without conscience, is the gravest mistake most of the, if you like, the activists, policy pushers, and all of that make.
Okay.
Telling us what is wrong is good. Telling us how to deal with it from the angle of pragmatic engagement is a more critical challenge on the table. Because all the policies, and I'm glad somebody mentioned it, you go out there, you find one wonderful policy, you see if you're in the US, this is what is going on. Simple question. Sir or ma, are you in the US? If the answer is no, what do you know about US history 50, 80, 120 years ago? Is this where they were? Those you think will go there and come back, you know the negotiations they made that will undermine you when they come back here. So, like I said, it's a whole of society crisis with fundamentally moral challenges, couched in political terms, but all of it pointing to a form of social decay, which manifests in the form of people holding public office for self-aggrandizement without realizing that it's actually for service delivery.
Okay.
Without realizing that every week they ought to write down, this week, this is what I achieved for the people in whose name I'm holding this office. Okay. That's part of the cocktail of the crisis on the table for all of us.
Okay, back to the phone lines. Do we still have Akase from Abuja on the line? Akase from Abuja, go right ahead.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead, Akase. Hello.
Good morning.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Yes, I want to say that the issue of governance has to take effect from the top. And if we must have a governance that will serve, if we must have a government that will serve the people, it has to take effect from the top. I would want to say that if we must find our leaders responsible, I think it should start from the top. I see no reason why the bloated ESCO. I see no reason why we have an overbloated National Assembly that makes so much consumption that is unhealthy and does not serve the interests of the people. I would want to say that if we must begin to adjust ourselves, the adjustment must start from the top. I don't see a reason why the president will carry a lengthy convoy. I don't see a reason why the ministers and all the chief executive of MDs will have a length of convoys and aids. It makes no sense, and it is against the principle of accountability. If we must want the local government councillor to be responsible, I think the responsibility has to start from the top.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
To appeal to the conscience of the people in government, that they should understand that the privilege they have today to serve the people is a very great privilege, and they must make use of it effectively. Lest posterity will not forgive them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akase from Abuja. Yes. Honorable Farouk, we are in the last lap of the program, and we're looking at what can be applied to turn this around. We always identify, you had Prof, he said, we identify the issues, but it isn't nearly enough. There has to be pragmatic steps taken to address the issues that we've raised here.
Yeah, which you see, we still come back to the issue that all these things we're talking about, just like what the Prof said, it has got nothing to do with the Constitution. Absolutely. The Constitution of this country, to me, it has not been tested 50%. You know, so it's we the problem. We, just like what he said. I mean, I was a member of National Assembly. I was a minority leader. In my constituency, nobody had ever asked me, what is a motion? What's a bill? What's an act? You know, so the people will still come to you. What are they going to get? So until such a time when all of us agree that, look, government means we, all of us. Those in authority hold the powers in trust on our behalf. When you decide to make somebody in office, tell him to do things that he's not supposed to do, just because he knows you. So the problem will still come back. Just like what my brother here said. There was no protest in this country. It was riot. No protest. People just rioted. Simple. Yes, people are hungry and so on and so forth, because partly the masses are also responsible. We, the elites, are also responsible. The masses are responsible in such that they will never even ask you, how did you make your money? Or where did you get these things from? They will only come to you, give me, give me, give me. Now, the elites also, when we get into offices, we forget where we're coming from. All of us, each and every one of us, if you go back to your primary school, where your alma mater, you will find out that probably there are no seats, there are no desks, there are no chalks, and so on. But we are the same people that will be going about with convoys and so on, and you'll be hailed when you go to your village. So until all of us come to realize that, look, we better hold these people responsible, have them in check, don't allow member of state assembly, national assembly, councillor also to live above his means. So until we all agree to do that, everybody will do his or her responsibility. Then you cannot hold anybody accountable. Those people in authority will do whatever they want because they know that when you come, you're not going to ask them of what they're doing. They will just ask them, give me my share, and so on. So all of us have to agree. So the Constitution is, to me, not perfect, because nothing is perfect, but the operators and inclusive of the people, because the people, the masses also need to know that President Tinubu is no more Nigerian than anybody. I mean, he is one amongst us whom we have vested the powers in him to administer this country. So, but if we don't, we should hold him responsible, hold him accountable. Look, just like what one of the callers said, President Tinubu should start leading by example. Cut the number of your convoy, cut the number of expenditure, and so on and so forth. But then when you do that cutting, make sure you are firm, make sure you fight corruption, make sure people do what they're supposed to do. Anybody that is brought before you that has not done anything should be punished. When the leadership leads by example, then probably everybody will follow.
Isn't well. As you begin to wind down, let's tie in this other aspect of it. Recently, the traditional institution has come out to say, look, part of the problems we have can be taken care of if we have a constitutional rule, if we can come in here with specific rules and say this is what we do. How would that enhance it?
Who will elect them? Because their rights is we are not running
circumstances of birth,
but with a theocratic dimension to it that God decreed them. Democracy has no accommodation for that. If you want to govern the people, you would have to subject yourself.
I thought this was all about what works for us.
No, this whole idea of what works for us. We either plan to walk this thing, because the PVC is one. The traditional ruler of my town, a professor, has one PVC. I have one. Every other, the other person has one. And that is the quality of citizenship. Now, responsibility is another part. There may not be quality of responsibility, but what binds us as citizens? We are not anybody's subjects. We are not running a feudal state. So I think that has to be clear. That debate, even in UK, there is a movement against the whole idea of, monarchy, and it's very strong. But that's not what's on the table for me. What I think needs to be discussed at this point in time is, how do you hold government accountable? Many people make all this thing about, like Honorable was talking about, reduce your convoy, reduce. All those are important, but they are not fundamental for me. Why do I say so? If you are an aide, for instance, to a senator or a member or a honorable member, there is distinct work that you are supposed to do to help that member. But what do? We use patronage and cronyism and bring people who cannot help that member. And so the same National Assembly now makes use of consultants when the people that are senior legislative aides are supposed to be people who are qualified to help him discharge that duty. That's fundamental. We need to be interested in who the SLAs are. And I think that Dr. Abayomi made that point about the judiciary, where we focus, but we don't also focus on those we pay money, because we pay people to support these honorable members, to support the senators, to perform their works effectively. We do not engage in finding out who are these SLAs, what are their qualifications, what do they do, what is the service delivery component of what they are doing. That's key. So it doesn't matter to me whether you are driving a Jeep or you are that's all those are. I think we've left that. It should be about service delivery. What are you providing for the people? Why do we have National Assembly? Why do we have a bicameral legislature? We have a bicameral because of our diversity. You are supposed to represent people. Represent the Igede people, represent the Igbo people, represent the Kanuri people, that's representation. But what do we get? We get people, like he said, when you are elected, the first thing you do is to begin to find clerks of this committee, clerk of that committee, member of this committee. The whole idea is no longer about the three things we know about you going to the National Assembly, which is lawmaking, oversight, and representation. So what do you get? You begin to find contracts. You begin to be interested in companies that will facilitate this and that. And the people who elected you will see you in less than 6 months, come back, you're suddenly, within the 6 months of your election, you've built the best houses. Why would they not come to you? Because you are holding their resources. As far as they are concerned, the money you are using to do that is their money. And we have pauperized our people to the level where they no longer see themselves as citizens. This whole idea of holding government accountable is only when people see themselves as citizens. We see these leaders now as masters, as people that will have to get crumbs from. But if you see yourself as a citizen and you know your self-worth as a citizen, then you can probably do that. We are holding public hearings in National Assembly that are not public in the sense in which we know it. People, you can't go there. Insecurity has made it that you can't even go there. And when you go there to even make the 40 minutes, everything is dispersed, everybody goes home. So we need to tidy up governance in a way that enforces the right of citizens and the quality of citizenship.
Right. Dr. Abayomi, can we have your closing comments in the next 2 minutes here as we wind down? Closing comments in the next 2 minutes here.
My colleague who spoke about the citizen. The whole essence of government is to meet the needs of citizens. And the whole essence of democracy is essentially to put some people there to serve us and to govern us in a way that is more conducive for our happiness. The question is, in our nation, are we achieving that? I think if we use all index, we will see that we are failing. One area that perhaps you need to look at is issue of knowledge. One thing, studying the history of the world, I find nations that are pervaded by the search for knowledge to be nations that stand out. And I always wonder, why is, Western societies what they are? I think many years ago, they came to the conclusion that knowledge should be in the forefront of development. But in our case, it is different. So there's a need for the elite of our nation to act fast. And it made something that is essential, the people, yes. But really, how do you really have what I would call knowledgeable people who can hold government to account unless they have knowledge. Like one of my colleagues said, and he's very correct, people today will go to the pit of hell in order to take. And in the process of taking, they lose everything. So our nation is almost at a precipice. And so many issues need to be looked at, in my view. The structure of government that we have now is not meeting the needs of our populace, our young people, the elderly, women or men. Something needs to be done and done fast.
Dr. Abayomi and Professor Ikechukwu, just a couple of minutes, at most, 2 for you to round off. Thank you.
Not much further to say because the essential points have been made, but 2 things stand out. Number 1, citizenship. We no longer have citizens, we have indigents. Once we understand that, then the point SNY is making will become clear. Nominal citizenship is different from substantive citizenship. I'm a Nigerian, so you can say, oh, that's a Nigerian citizen. But I do not make the demands a citizen should make. Somebody who thinks he has a right to query his representative, that's a crisis on the table. I only go to beg from him. So to that extent, I cannot become part of the political equation. Now, as to the matter of the Constitution, what the masses need, without prejudice to the prevailing views on these matters, there's a fact that should be put on the table. A good deal of the time, we, the elite, sit down, pretend that we know what the masses need. Meanwhile, we are dealing with what we want, what we understand, what we believe a democracy should deliver. We do not ask ourselves, those we say are in need of this, do they really understand what we are talking about? So the conversation also is not just about the need to rescue Nigeria, but also the need for elite self-re-education.
All right.
So that the presumption about having the solutions and knowing what needs to happen itself needs to be interrogated. Okay. That's part of the issue to be put on the table.
All right. And it is on that note we'll have to leave this conversation, and I'd like to say a big thank you to all our guests. Honorable Farouk Adamu Aliyu, who is here in the Abuja studio, Ezenwa Wagu, also here in the Abuja studio, and Dr. Tunji Abayomi, who joined us from our Lagos studio, and Professor Ikechukwu, who joined us via Zoom. I'd like to thank you all, gentlemen, for your views tonight. And to also those who called in, thank you for being part of the program. Next week, we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stober. Bye for now.